It's five dynamics of a successful relationship leader. I'm Oz Hillman, and good to have my good friend Ford. And Ford and I can't remember the year we met, but it's been close to probably 10 years, I would say, by now, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, I think that's about right, actually. Very good.
So it goes by quick. So what we're talking about tonight is how to thrive in your relationships to get more done and have more impact. And Ford and I, we were kind of going down tracks in our own marketplace calls. He was a business owner for many years, had a very successful business and sold it. And I had also been in business, and we ended up both starting new ventures and kind of ministry and business ventures. And a mutual friend of ours kept saying, "You need to meet Ford Taylor. You need to meet." I must have heard that a year or two before we actually connected. And Ford lives partly in Texas and partly in Cincinnati, and was very involved with transformation efforts in Cincinnati. And so, Ford, good to have you on our session tonight. It's going to be a fun time. It's long overdue.
Well, thank you, Oz. It's always good to be with you, and it's so good to see so many signing in on the chat rooms, friends from all over the world. What a blessing.
Yeah, it's amazing that we can connect with so many all over the world now in this. So I want to take a special welcome to our Change Agent Master Mentor Program members. We have really enjoyed getting to know many of our members there. And if you don't know about that, you can learn at camastermentor.com. But Ford's got 3 of his sessions on that site already. And so good to have all of you. If you'll stay to the end with us tonight, we will share with you a resource tool that I think will be very helpful to you called the Relational Needs Assessment Tool. You can take this, and it's especially good to take it with your spouse. And it'll be a digital download. We'll share it with you at the end of our time together. And there's no cost to that. It's our way of saying thanks for staying with us till the end. And you can ask questions anytime during our session. We'll take those questions at the end, and just go into the chat area to enter those questions. That's the easiest way for us to access those. So, Ford, are you ready to get going?
I am ready, Oz, and thank you so much for doing this. And I always love working alongside you, so it's an honor, and it's humbling to be on here with you. So thank you, and thanks for the impact you're having all over the world.
All right. Well, let's begin by sharing a story. And the story is about a guy named Ben, and he was a business guy, and a very driven business guy, and pretty bottom line kind of person. And he found that he was so bottom line that he often wouldn't meet with you unless you shared with him what the nature of the meeting was. And he was always in meetings where he would cut the meeting short unless there was really accomplishing something. And so his life was pretty driven to be a bottom line kind of person. And that Ben was not Ben, it was me. And Ben and I, or Ford, when I met Ford and I went through your 3-day conference or training, Transformational Leadership, it literally transformed how I related to people. And I am now what I would say is a relational leader. And we're going to learn what that is tonight. And Ford coined that term. And it's somewhere between being transactional and relational. And he even wrote a book by that title. And so that's what we're going to get into tonight. And it's going to be a great resource for you. So we're going to talk about 5 key areas, although in your training, you get into about 30 areas. And we're just going to touch on 5 of them, but there's plenty to say about these 5 areas. And the first one is there are 2 types of people, transactional and relational. What do you have to say about that, Mr. Ford? And before we get too far into this, how did this training come about for you?
Well, Oz, as you said years ago, Sandra and I, we had a company that we worked in, and it grew very, very large. And as I was traveling in that company, I found something as I went around the world. And then I stayed home for a few years because I wanted to try to finish strong at home with my children. And then I started traveling a lot again. And what I found was something that was a little bit confusing. And that was that everybody I met was smart, gifted, or talented in at least one area. And many are smart, gifted, or talented in lots of areas. And almost all the people I met in the world have huge hearts. They really care about other people. But I couldn't understand, why is it, if most people are that way, is that not who we hear more about? Why is that not who we're electing as government officials worldwide? Why are we not seeing movies in the newspaper? And then I realized that a lot of leadership out there talks about the what leadership is, and it's very motivational and it's inspirational. But I didn't find a whole lot that I saw that was practical and implementable. I mean, kind of a playbook, if you will, a recipe manual to be able to practically implement being the kind of leader where those smart brains and those huge hearts were connected. And that's kind of what got me started into it.
So you discovered this idea that some were very transactional and some were relational. Why don't you unpack that a little bit for us?
Well, if you can think about this as a continuum, and on one end of the tip, well, I mean, just call it the very tip, are people that are just totally 100% relational. And on the other end of the tip are people that are totally 100% transactional. Now, not a ton of people live on the tips, but most of us live on one end of that or the other. And the reality is those two people drive each other crazy. In our conferences, when we ask people, if you're married and highly relational, raise your hand. Now, if your spouse is highly transactional, raise your other hand. And then we do it the other way around. And over 85% of the time, almost every class, and sometimes it's 100%, all hands are in the air. And what happens is sometimes we might marry that person that's fulfilling a need that we don't actually have. And then later it drives us crazy. And even in the workplace, in ministries, you have teams of people, and you got highly relational people wanting to talk a lot at the meetings, and you have highly transactional people wanting to, would you just shut up and get something done? And so the number one thing I would say about this,
guilty.
Yeah, well, there's lots of attributes here, but the big one I would say is to think about it this way. It's not that highly relational people can't be productive, and it's not that highly transactional people can't be relational. And there's a number of attributes, but the biggest one I would say is highly relational people struggle with focusing on the task at hand if the relationships aren't good. And highly transactional people struggle with focusing on the relationship if the tasks aren't complete. And so when those two things are happening, it can drive a lot of tension. Now, there's other attributes, but the key is what we try to do is give people tools, ingredients, behaviors, skill sets to move towards the middle of that. And we call that being relational, a combination of both.
That's great. All right. How we often see things differently. Oh, come on. We don't. We always see things just alike.
100%. We all think the same way. So think of this also the same way as the relationship continuum, and think of the brains on a continuum. And on one tip of the continuum, we have people that their brains never stop. Everything's connected to everything. The dog's connected to the kids are connected to work. What went on at work that day is connected to the husband, which is connected to the mother-in-law, which is connected to dinner Friday night, which is connected to how's that going to impact the grandkids. So that's one end of the continuum. And on the other end of the continuum, we have brains that think in boxes. In other words, they have a box for work, a box for family, a box for each child, a television box, a money box, a food box. And on that end, those boxes are not connected. And so on that end of the brain, if we get focused on something, we can get locked into that box. And the other end starts moving around and talking about other things. And all of a sudden, there's chaos, there's resentment, there's rejection, and there's arguments. Now, again, if you sit in a room or if you read the research, there's research I studied a lot last year because a lot of people are trying to prove what I'm about to say is not true. But again, we ask this question in the room after we do the training, and we say, if you live on that end that we call spaghetti, where everything's connected, okay, if you live on that end, please raise your hand. And often 100% of the women in the room will raise their hand. It's always way up in the 90s. And we ask the other end, if you think like this, where nothing's connected to nothing, raise your hand. And it's not unusual that 100% of the men will raise their hand. And so research shows that the vast majority of women, everything's connected to everything. And the vast majority of men, we think in boxes and nothing's connected to anything. And that also can cause conflict between us. And just like relational and transactional, if we're transactional and we honor the people who bring relationship to the table, we affirm it. And if the relational people affirm the transactional, the relationships are so much stronger because they appreciate what each brings to the table. It's the same here. If that brain that's spaghetti, which is predominantly women, can honor that box brain, which is predominantly men, and vice versa, and not get irritated with each other, because we need relational and transactional people at the table, and we need both of those brains at the table, because when they're all working together, we come up with much better solutions. Now, Oz, as you know, the biggest problem with that box brain is we have a couple of boxes. I'm going to talk about one of them that are bigger than the others, and it's completely empty. It has nothing in it. We're sitting there, we're in the ozone, nothing's going on. We get a question, what are you thinking? We say nothing. That spaghetti brain does not believe that's possible. And all of a sudden we have friction. But
yeah, I've had friction with that.
But if we honor the other end, guess what? A lot of that friction goes away.
You know, it's interesting. Before I met you years ago, I had a guy that was in my life, and he could see that transactional nature in myself. And he would often say, people over projects, people over projects. And that was quite a shift for me. But I realized that as I went through your stuff, that it requires some intentional changing if we're going to move in that other side to be able to get some balance in our life. So, and I think you do a great job in helping us do that and considering why we want to do that, because it's beneficial. And, you know, I think what you've proven is that many times when you, increase the relational side, you actually do better at the transactional faster. You want to comment on that?
Yeah. You know, this term that you said, you know, a coin called relational, here's what it means. It means that you just take a little bit of time, that you make the relationship so deep that no transaction can ever separate you. It doesn't mean you won't get a new job, but the transaction can't, the task can't drive you so crazy because the relationship is deep. And when you're a relational or transformational leader, what you find out is that you can stand on that foundation in the middle, and you can look down both ends of the continuum. You can look at those highly relational people, and they no longer drive you crazy. You can look at those highly transactional people, and they no longer drive you crazy. You can look at those box brains like me, and they no longer drive you crazy. And you can look at those spaghetti brains, and they no longer drive you crazy. And when people are not driving each other crazy, conflict goes down. When conflict goes down, productivity goes up. When productivity goes up in a company, it's more profitable. In a marriage, there's more intimacy. Between friends, it's a deeper level of friendship. So there's all kinds of positive outcomes in this.
Great. All right. Keys to successful conflict resolution. We all have conflict from time to time. What are some keys to successfully do conflict without losing relationship?
Right. Well, we just talked about two things that can cause a lot of conflict. So let's talk about now, you know, how might we overcome that? Well, we teach a tool called a social covenant, where we get groups of people to answer a question. When we're together, how do we want to treat each other? And around the world, people say the same answers. We want to respect one another, care about one another, affirm one another, be honest, transparent, vulnerable, be open, be good listeners. You know, I've been doing these for years and probably done, I don't even know how many hundreds or thousands now, but I've never seen anything on that list that we're going to gossip, we're going to be resentful, we're going to hate one another. Those words don't come up. Well, then we say, well, if we could agree on that, how would we deal with it if someone broke that agreement? And we believe it's a really simple solution. You go to that person one-on-one and you try to talk with them. If that doesn't work, you try again with another person or two with you. Now, the key to this is that when you go to that person, is that the way you go is important. And number one, you go in humility. And that means I might be wrong. Could I share something with you? It may just be me. Number two, you go in pre-forgiveness. And that means you've already forgiven them because you're there to restore the relationship, not to be bitter over what happened. And number three, you go in love. And the definition of love I use here is that I care more about you than I care about how you feel about me. Because what if when I'm about to share with you your behavior, what if it's hurting your marriage, your relationship with your children, you're getting a raise or a promotion at work? And so love is important. Very few people can love that way. And number four, you go with the 100% of the truth and the facts, because sometimes the truth and the facts are not the same. But when you do that and you go one-on-one, it doesn't work. If you try again and that still doesn't work, that you would agree in advance that you would sit before a group of people and you would share what went on and you would let that group decide. You know, is Ford wrong? Is Oz wrong? Because see, the truth is in every conflict, there's three sides to every story. There's your side, there's my side, and there's the truth. And the problem with conflict is most people don't go one-on-one. They normally tell someone else, and that's gossip. And I believe if any organization could stop gossip and learn not to be offended, that they could shift their whole organization in about 48 hours. So if we stop the gossip and we go one-on-one, conflict just starts taking a nosedive. Well, what would happen if someone came and I was wrong? So Oz comes to me and says, Ford, I believe that when you did this, it was disrespectful. Well, if I was wrong, the appropriate way to deal with that is to apologize. Now, this is where you really resolve conflict. And Oz, as you know, we teach this apology called a 6-step apology. And step number 1 is you state what you did. Yes, Oz, you're right. Me doing that to you in front of those people was disrespectful. Number 2, I was wrong. Number 3, I am sorry, or I apologize. And number 4, will you, or when you can, forgive me. And number 5, I give you permission to hold me accountable, not to behave that way anymore. And number 6, is there anything else I owe you an apology for? And what happens is when we walk in that posture with each other, oops, I jumped ahead. When we walk in that posture with one another, we start seeing conflict go down around us. Now, you may have a person in the room or in the group that doesn't want to walk in this posture. Well, they're going to be the source of conflict a lot, okay? Because instead of going to the person that they have a struggle with, they'll go to other people. And when they go to other people, like we talked about, that's gossip. And let me share this with you about gossip. Great people talk about vision and ideas. Average people talk about things. Small people talk about other people. Smaller people let them. Smaller people join them. And even smaller people tell others. So let's learn to go one-on-one, and let's learn to apologize this way and watch what happens to conflict in your organization. Because, go ahead, and I want to share one more thing. Go ahead.
Yeah. Where do you see the need to be right? I think that for some of us, there's something ingrained in us that they just have this need to be right.
Yeah. So what happens in a lot of conflicts, the reason it's so hard to resolve is people will go in a room and they'll draw a line in the sand because of that need to be right. I actually wrote a blog this week that's going to get published here in a couple of weeks and talked about, and I'm not saying I've completely lost that. I've not given up my need for truth. I'm trying to give up my need to be right. But I was really bad at that. And I'm pretty sure my wife and daughters and son-in-law are on the phone right now, are on this webinar. And if they popped on and could chat, I'm sure my wife would tell you that, yeah, I was one of those people. That, I could argue into the ground on anything because that need to be right. And people who have that need, you can be pretty sure they have a lot of insecurity. And that was the way I was. On the outside, I looked had my act together, some arrogance, some pride, but on the inside, insecure. And so those people that have that need to be right, it's probably out of a point of insecurity.
I think that one of the things that people kind of miss is there are 6 steps in here for a reason. And I think if we, especially guys, I think that we have a tendency just to say, I'm sorry I made you feel that way, or I'm sorry you think that way. I apologize. Well, that's not much of an apology. So I think the 6th step helps us really go deeper with it, stating the offense so they clearly understand that. And that we acknowledge that we were wrong in that if we truly believe that. And then, that whole thing, I'm sorry you feel that way, or I made you feel that way. Why don't you talk a little bit about that and how we kind of negate the process when we say things like that?
Yeah. When we do this training, we give 6 or 8 different things that you don't do during this apology. And one of them is you don't put an if in front of it. If I did that, I'm sorry. If you say that, your apology just went down the tubes. Another one is don't apologize for something you didn't do. Because if you apologize for something you didn't do, you're just letting the other person stay in their muck. In other words, their lens, that cloudy lens they have towards you, will stay cloudy. And that's why you have to go to the truth and the facts. And the other one that you just talked about, Oz, is we should never apologize for the way we made somebody feel unless they told us our behavior made them feel that way. Because we should apologize for the behavior. But if I say to you, I'm sorry that what I did hurt your feelings, I'm projecting onto you that if someone had done that to me, it would hurt my feelings. It doesn't mean it hurt your feelings. Okay. The other thing is I'm taking control over you. When I say I'm sorry for how I made you feel, we talk in the training about how thoughts cause feelings and feelings cause behavior. Well, if I'm telling you I made you feel a way, then I'm saying I have control over how you think and how you feel. And I don't. You have control on how you think and how you feel. And if you were hurt, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But don't say, I'm sorry I hurt you. Apologize for what you did, not for how you made someone else feel, because there's no guarantee. I've seen people say, I'm sorry I offended you. And I'll say, look, I accept your apology, but in no way was I offended. I mean, I'm okay. It didn't offend me. I appreciate your apology. Your behavior was bad, but I choose not to be offended over that behavior. So be careful on those kinds of things when you put it in there. And since you said it, let's keep going. And why is that forgiveness step in there? Because forgiveness, and a lot of people on this call, we're believers. We have a faith in Jesus. And I have a message I give called the best kept secret in Christianity, forgiveness. Because if you want to live a life free, if you want to have a free life where you're smiling a lot and you're getting along with people, it's based on forgiveness. How fast can you forgive those that hurt you? So when you ask for forgiveness, it's actually offering to give a gift to the other person. Because when they forgive, they get free of the offense. If they can't forgive, then they stay bound in the offense.
Yeah, and I think it's important to ask the question, will you forgive me of blank? I mean, that really states it right out there. And it really puts it on them to decide, oh, am I going to forgive him? But we don't have any control over whether somebody forgives us. Now, I just got a question this week on that one. What do you do when somebody refuses to forgive you?
You're finished. I mean, in other words, you've done your part. And the reason that I add that word, when you can, will you forgive me? I want to give people time to process if they don't have a forgiving heart on the front end. But once you ask, you've done all you can do. It's now 100%. And I say it's between them and them and God. You've done all you can do. Forgiveness is totally the choice of the forgiver. And forgiveness is not a feeling. Forgiveness can turn into a feeling if we continually forgive, but forgiveness is a choice. And so I encourage you that if someone says, will you forgive me? The first words out of your mouth are, of course I forgive you. When someone apologizes, don't say, don't worry about it. If they need to apologize, they're doing it because they feel they need to. If they say, will you forgive me? Say, absolutely, 100%. Because when you forgive, you feel forgiven. And I can show you where Jesus actually said that. But that's why you do it, because you get free of the stuff.
Yeah, and I think that, as you say, it's important for the person to actually acknowledge they are forgiving you. But then if you forgive them, you need to forgive them and not make them pay for whatever they did. That's another strategy of the enemy, is that I just, say the words, but I actually don't take it to heart, and I'm not living in that forgiveness.
Well, that's why that fifth step's so important, because when we say, I give you permission to hold me accountable, we're showing a sincerity that I really want to change that behavior. I messed up a lot in our marriage, and a lot of people know that story. But within that, I was a very angry man. I had passive aggressive tendencies that sometimes I still have to overcome, but they were way worse, and mainly towards my wife, towards Sandra. And so when I made the choice that I was not going to keep doing those things to her, I give you permission to hold me accountable means, because we all have blind spots. We all do things or say things that we don't even know the impact. And so by giving someone permission, you're letting them know, I see that behavior again. And that's how we can change. That's where transformation comes, is having people that can tell us about things that we can't see in ourselves. And so that accountability part, it's a huge part of these 6 steps.
Yeah. So being a good listener is our number 5. And tell us what you mean by being a good listener.
Well, sometimes I'm embarrassed to be teaching this one. We actually have a survey that we have at the back of our manual now. And I took that survey and I thought, yeah, I'm a pretty good listener. And then I took it again as if I was busy. I thought of all those questions that while I'm busy, and honestly, I was pretty embarrassed at the outcome. I'm one of those guys that can end up on my cell phone too much. I can be looking at things when I'm around other people. And so for me, like you used that word intentionally a while ago, I had to be really intentional to be that kind of listener. And the model we teach is called the slower listening model. And that S means that we square up towards the person we're talking to, that we turn towards them. Now, even in today's world on all the Zooms, that's now truly important. I mean, I've been on a lot of Zoom calls that, I mean, they leave their camera on and someone's talking and you can tell that they're muted and they're talking on the phone to other people. I mean, you can see it. At least be smart enough to, turn your camera off. But even in this environment, you can use these tools. So it means square up and be silent. Most of us, we're trying to figure out our response while people are talking. And this one takes a lot of work. Or we'll try to finish the other person's sentence. So that S stands for square up to the person, remain silent, let them finish their thought before we step in. The L means with your body language, lean in just a little bit, tilt your head in. It means lean in and listen. Everything we communicate is 55% through our body language. And so if we're communicating out 55% body language, it's the same as listening. 55% of whether people know we're listening is in our body language. So lean in and listen. The O means have open posture. Be careful about having your arms crossed and leaning back and looking out the other side of your eyes. Be open with your posture and learn to ask open-ended questions. If you ask someone, what did you do today? They'll probably say nothing. But if you ask your children, if you know who their friends are in their favorite class, tell me what you did in that class, who you had lunch with, and what you talked about. Ask open-ended questions. If you have people that work with you that are very introverted or silent, they may not want to talk as much. One way to get them to talk is with that O. Ask questions to draw it out of them. The W means be willing. Show a willingness to slow down on what you're doing. Some people like to use the word wait there, and I'm good with that. So be willing or wait. There is a little acronym I like for wait, and it means why am I talking right now? So have a willingness, wait, let people finish. The E stands for eye contact, because when you're looking at people and making eye contact, again, that's that body language. That's how they know that you're fully engaged. And the R, relax when people are talking to you. Try not to be stressed. Respond. And if necessary, you might repeat back what they said to be sure you clearly understood. And so we just call this slower down and listening. SLOWER.
That's good. Yeah, I find that repeating what people said is so beneficial, because it's amazing how often we really didn't hear what they said. And when we repeat it back, it gives them the opportunity to clarify that and make sure that you're understanding what they're trying to communicate. And all of that's really, really helpful.
Yeah, and Oz, as we get older, some of us who have hair the color of mine, our ears don't work quite as well. So we already are struggling with hearing. And so we have to be careful with listening, because the hearing has already become a problem too. So
I'd like to talk, before we go on to kind of phase 2 of this, one of the things you teach is affirmations. And tell the people what you mean by that and how that's used.
Well, an affirmation is speaking something positively about someone, saying it directly to them. And it can be two forms. One can be a thank you, maybe for something they've done for you, or it could be an attribute, a value, a quality, a skill that they have that you speak positively into their life. Now, there's nothing wrong with sitting at the dinner table and telling your family how great your spouse is or how great one of the children are, or in a management meeting and talk about what a great job someone did. There's nothing wrong with that. But an affirmation is actually turning, and it's looking at the person. And I've found that when you look them in the eye, it's very unlikely that you'll start talking about them, that you'll keep talking to them. And an affirmation is important that you make it 100% about the receiver. You don't make it about you at all. You're not doing it to get them to do something for you. You're not doing it to make yourself look good. You're doing it to affirm them and build them up. And so when we do affirmations the right way, we don't use words like I want to affirm you, I want to thank you. See, that's a desire. That's like saying I want to apologize. That's not an apology. So when we take those words out and we turn and we look at them and we make it totally about them and to them and not just about them, it's amazing what that tool does. And as you know, that is one of the 5 love languages or one of the 5 languages of appreciation. So we know it's a big one if it falls in one of the top 5 love languages also.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's those affirmations. I find that I was raised not very verbal in our family with words of affirmation, or even the words "I love you." That was not part of our family structure growing up. So affirmations were very hard, and you and I have talked about that. And but it's but it so that's another one of those things of being intentional. And affirmations can also be very powerful because the Word of God talks about our identity and the power of words. Positive words can go a long way with people, especially our children, and negative words go a long way to destroying a person. And so that's why these affirmations are very important. Well, so we've just really done an appetizer tonight. There's so much more we could be talking about. And part of what we wanted to share tonight as well is just that, with this COVID situation, you've had to shift how you're doing things. You and I have been on, a lot of times are on the road teaching our workshops, and you especially. And so you've shifted that now to where this is one of the few times you've really done a webinar like this to let people know that you're doing your training online. And so you've got a 9-session transformational leadership masterclass that we're introducing really for the first time tonight. Although you've had an on-demand class, you haven't really had something like this. And so what you're going to do in this class is, you're going to help people in 3 core relationships: their workplace, their marriage, and their family. And as a result, you're going to transform their lives. I mean, we've got so many testimonies. As I was looking at a lot of your material, so many people have powerful testimonies of what you've done. And what I like about it too, Ford, is that you have some of the latest technology on online training, and it's you've incorporated tools that allow people to learn the most effective ways, and you provide tools for them to use. And so it's a tremendous course. And so what we're doing tonight is really letting you experience some of what Ford has done. In fact, we're going to show you 2 minutes of his online course.
Okay, let's jump right in. Before we break down the 4 levels of change, I'd like to ask you a question. Do you struggle with change? Your ability to accept and easily adapt to change is a significant step in becoming a transformational leader. I too once struggled with change. There was a time in my business and my marriage where I thought I knew it all. It was hard for me to receive good constructive feedback, especially if I felt that it was critical, and many times I did. By not being able to receive feedback, it was hard for me to change. To put it simply, I had a huge need to be right. I thought I was right and didn't really need anyone to tell me anything. Then one night, my 6-year-old daughter asked me a question around midnight on a Friday night after I came home from being gone all week. That question broke my heart and made it clear, and even in my answer back to her, that I had to be open to feedback. I needed to make some changes to have a successful marriage, a more successful business, and a healthy relationship with my children. Boy, have I been thankful for that little question from that little girl almost 25 years ago. So let's talk about the 4 levels of change. The first level is knowledge. It's the easiest level to change because it's tied to our thoughts. We can read a book, listen to a speech, watch a DVD. The second level of change is a little bit more difficult because that's tied to our feelings, and that's called an attitude. And the reason that's more difficult is because it's also connected to our emotions. And when our emotions get involved, that alone sometimes can make it difficult for us to go to the third level of change. And that third level is the actual behavior. It's how we act. It's the most difficult level for us to change as an individual because it is actually tied to our day-to-day behavior. Now, if we want to get a relational, organizational, or cultural change, which is the 4th level of change, we have to have enough people who are pulling on the same rope in the same direction toward the same vision. Now, this change is important because it affects the interpersonal relationships in any organization. Now, this requires a tipping point. Now, I got the best news for you in the world. If you want to shift an organization's culture or relationship, it only takes 3 to 15% to shift a whole culture in a company, a family, even a city or a nation. I've also got the worst news in the world. It only takes 3 to 15% to shift a culture, a relationship, or an organization in any of those same spheres. So it's important that we as individuals, if we want to have influence in the sphere in which we work, if we want to have a change, we first have to do those 3 levels individually: our knowledge, our attitude, our behavior, and then work alongside other people who also want to do it to make a change in the sphere in which we work. Now, before we move to the next chapter, let's take a short quiz.
You taught your course, your live session, in 16 countries around the world. And so it's a great opportunity to be able to teach this online. And we have a number of countries online tonight. And so it's a great benefit for them. So let's take a look at some of the things that you cover in this training. You're going to identify and remove individual and team constraints, which are barriers to success for public and private companies and educational and inspirational organizations and social enterprises. You're going to identify personal growth constraints and understand the origins of these constraints. You'll improve communication between individuals and departments in a business, and conflict resolution, both personal and professional resolution techniques to manage conflict. We touched briefly on that, but there's a whole lot more that goes into that. You're going to be a better listener. And when you become a better listener, you're a better communicator. You're going to learn how to deal with social anxiety in a personal and professional settings, and receive a discipline model tool. You've got a lot of tools in your course, and the workbooks that are provided give us a lot of tools. You're going to gain the necessary tools required to become a transformational leader and agents of change. And you're going to enhance various leadership styles in personal and professional spheres of influence. You're going to transform interpersonal relationships among employees, teams, partnerships, and boards, and other areas of engagement, as well as marriage and family. So it's going to help you in your work life, your personal life with your spouse or your family, your children, and a whole lot more. So let's take a look at someone who went through your course and hear what she had to say.
I'm always looking for new and better ways to do things, and I think that an organization will only rise to the level of its leader. So I think a good leader is always learning. Transformational leadership has the biggest, most exponential results of any program you will ever participate in. What's powerful about transformational leadership is done in the language of work. And it's done in the language of business. And it's done in the language of how can I be more successful? I'd heard many leadership principles before, but I'd never heard them joined and packaged in a way and hooked in such a way that they began to work in an exponential way. So I couldn't walk away and go, that one tool changed everything. But I could walk away and say, wow, those 3 tools woven together in that way could change my organization and could change my life. It's triggered me in all the domains of my life: my personal life, my family life, my work life, my community life. And really at the core of it, it really focuses on making me a better person. What it does is it brings out the great leader that is inside of you. And so you begin leading from a position of strength and influence and really goodness to make the world a better place.
Now we're introducing this 9-session course, and we're also introducing 4 special bonuses. And if you were to put a value on that, when we say value, it's what is the real value of something versus the cost of something. I'm always marveled at books, Ford, that, the value of a book. And what people put into a book, and we can get it for $15 or $20, and yet sometimes the value of that book is so much more. Because it can transform your life. I don't know if you've ever thought about that.
Yeah, actually, you're the one that challenged me to think about it because, we put a price on a book. We put a price on a training, a price on consulting. We put a price on a meal. We put a price on everything. But oftentimes we don't think about the value. We think more about the price. And of course, one of our goals in everything we do is that we bring more value to our clients, to our relationships than we charge them for. And so our hope is that this book brings far more value than the $15 or $20. At least that's my hope.
So that's one of the bonuses you get if you register by June 11th. And then we're also incorporating 2 hours of group coaching with you. And that is really valued quite high compared to what the cost is going to be for that, because you've been consulting with Fortune 500 and 1,000 companies for many years. And so you're sought after for your advice. And we're incorporating 2 hours of group coaching as part of the program. We're also going to incorporate 2 transformational leadership syllabuses. These syllabuses have everything written that you can fill in the blanks and be able to learn everything that you're going to be taught in these courses. And there are 2 syllabuses because one syllabus does the general training on the course, and then the other is specifically tied to some of the Christian values that you're going to learn in these. And you're also going to get $100 savings if you register by June 11th before the price goes up. So when we look at the value of the course, not necessarily the price, but the value, you see that the course itself would be a value of over $600, the relational book 20, and your coaching, your time would be worth $1,000, and then the transformational leader syllabus. And so we could say in a general marketplace, the value might be around $1,720, but that's not what the cost of the course is going to be. This COVID-19 has really changed everything. And, typical ministry conference, you would charge $600 easily for people to go through your live session. And a 2-day conference would be well over $800. If it's a week-long training, you can expect it to pay $1,000 or $1,200 or more. And then you got to add on the cost of all the hotel and travel costs and rental, car rental. So what should a session like this be? And I know that you and I, we would both love to be able to offer our trainings for free if we could, but we got to make a living too, and it costs something to create these state-of-the-art technologies that we use for this training. So easily, it would be a good value if it were $1,500 or $900 or even $495. But the good news is that the course is really only going to be $197. As I say, your live session would cost $600 to go through, and you're getting all the information that you would at the live session. And so, Ford, it's great that you're offering such a value to people. And what would you say to folks about being engaged with this online?
Well, we are told regularly by people who've done the online course that they actually get more value out of it than the live course because they get it slower and over time. And plus, by having access to it for a year, that you can go back in, review, watch, do whatever you want. And we really recommend that if you're going to do it, that you do it with another person. Mm-hmm. Because, 2 people doing it together, that concept we teach bumper buddies, accountability people, they can help each other get through and activate the tools that are in there. So we get feedback that from a lot of places, it's actually better than the live course.
Mm. Well, it's an awesome course, and I love the technology, So what we're offering is to take the course. Generally, it's going to be up until June 11th. It's going to be $197, and you can make 4 payments of that if cash flow is a problem for you, or the $197. Then we have this other option that's $497, and that's 2 hours of personal one-to-one coaching, and you're only going to take 20 people to do that because of your time, but they can take advantage of that and get some really good personal coaching from you. And so if you want to enroll, go to tlmaster.com, tlmaster.com. But we've got one other good thing for those of you who stayed on the call, and that is that we're going to give an additional discount if you register by 9 p.m. But before we talk about that, let's listen to Pierre.
My name is Pierre Perot, and I'm a part owner and manager of a family-owned business by the name of American Micro Products. This team became so excited about it that they asked, would it be possible for the whole company to go through it? And we had already determined that that would be part of the process, so our managers and supervisors went through next, and we asked them to begin to live that for 6 months again in front of employees, so that they'd be held accountable and people would see change before they even knew what the change was about. Ultimately, this past May, we sent the final group of our employees, and that was over 230 people, through transformational leadership. I can tell you that I was a part of actually all of those classes when we would send 20, 23 people through at a time. Each month, we would send 20 to 23 people through. That people came out of there so excited, they were asking, what if this company could look like that? What if people would begin to trust each other so much that they were excited about coming to work every day, that they had no fear of making mistakes from the standpoint of being chastised or condemned for them, that they wouldn't be judged for who they were, that it was safe to come and be who they were, and who could make commitments to one another about how we would treat each other.
You know, when I think about this, I think that, you know, just what if all this did was help improve one key relationship in your life, or helped you radically change how you related to those you work with, or maybe improved your relationship with your spouse and kids? Wouldn't it be worth it just for that? So the cost is $197 for the entire 9-session course. You'll save $100 and get the 4 bonuses worth $1,117 if you order by June the 11th. The price will go up to $297 on June the 12th. You can also take advantage of our 4 payment option of $79 a month for 4 months, or you can take advantage of the coaching feature that we're only taking 20 people for that, for one-on-one coaching with Ford Taylor, 2 hours, and that comes to $497. So just click on the link below, and that'll take you to the order page, and I know it'll be a blessing to you. So here's one. What do you do if your wife is extremely transactional one and you are the extremely relational one? None of the marriage enrichment or advice books work. Any recommendations on books or resources for this situation?
I could go downstairs and get Sandra to come answer this one. No, I'm kidding. Okay. Yeah, that's a great question, because it is normal that that's the case in a lot of marriages. And what I would say is, for me, I was very low transaction, especially at home. I could be relational at work, but at home, I kind of came home, sat down, and expected her to do everything. And she's really good at doing everything. And so what I learned, I asked her, and I started helping around the kitchen more. She asked me to clean the garage. I mean, there's things that she asked me to do transactionally. And I found that as I did that, guess what? She had more time to be more relational. And then she does things for me relationally. She's, again, people that know Sandra, they like her more than me, but that's okay. I like her more than me now too. It took me 20 years to figure that out. But if you'll do that, it'll open the door for a good conversation around it, because it's hard to have the conversation, but someone has to go first. But to be able to sit down and talk with your spouse and honor them for what they bring to the table. Thank you for bringing that part of our marriage to the table. So I would thank your wife for being transactional, and then do some transactional things that might take some things off of her plate, and see how that goes.
That's awesome. So you can basically on June 12th, the cost of the course is going to be $297. So you basically get 50% off if you register tonight by 9 p.m. And just go to tlmaster.com. Here's another question. How do you strike a balance between being relational and transactional when dealing with a difficult employee?
Well, this is where the discipline model comes in, because we try to teach teams, and you'll find this in the course, that the highest productive teams, what we call high-performing teams, have a combination of two things. They have healthy relationships and high performers. So in this terminology, think of it this way. They're relational and transactional. They can perform, they can get their job done, and they have healthy relationships. And so the discipline model that we teach in this course lets you deal with both. If they're inappropriate or not healthy relationally with the employees, on how to deal with that if they're not getting their job done. And this particular tool, what's really cool about it is that you never have to fire anybody again, and you never have to keep anybody you don't want. And it's a legal tool, but it basically puts the ball in their court to make decisions. And it's done with questions and stories and information. And we probably don't have enough time to teach the tool right now because it goes into a little bit of depth. But when you do discipline right, because remember, punishment is about the punisher, discipline is about the person, because discipline is training. And so there is a tool in here that teaches how to do that.
Well, that's good. I want to go to the next page and just let everybody know I'm going to share with them right now the link to the self-assessments tool for discovering your relational needs. And so you should look in your chat area and get that link. And that's a free download for staying with us till the end of the call today. So we do appreciate you staying with us for the call. So we've got a few more questions. Let's tackle them. Do you cover how to communicate with a leader that speaks a lot? Sometimes can't get a word in edgewise, and the other person tends to be more of the listener, but has key wisdom in discussions that need to take place. And the leader perhaps has a patience problem.
Yeah. Well, you got two things going on. It could be a patience problem, but there's two kinds of communicators. There are those that communicate externally, and they think and process out loud. That's an external processor. And then you have an internal processor. That's the people that are thinking internally. They get their thoughts together, and then they want to share. You may know someone in our country now that's an external processor. And so sometimes we can get ourselves in trouble by thinking out loud. But if you are the internal processor and your boss is the external, you might go to them and say, may I share something with you? Maybe no one's ever said it, but I think it's first affirm them. Thank you so much for providing me a job. Give them an affirmation, something about who they are, and say, may I share something? And tell them, I'm an internal processor, and I think I have some good ideas that might help the organization. And I think I've learned something that maybe you're an external processor. And if you would give me time to process and respond and give me a chance to finish, I think I have some good ideas for you. But start off with an affirmation and a thank you, and that'll open the door for them to be more open to your conversation. But that's how I would approach it.
Okay. All right. Let's see. I'm getting a report that the link is not working, so I will let Nicole know that. But it is working for some, because we have a sign up from Gloria and Diana, but some of you have had a little problem. So I'm going to let my tech person know about that, who is live with us. So Nicole, please check out the link to make sure that link's working. Some of the folks are not able to access that. So we will check that out. But if for some reason we are not able to get you tonight, you make sure that let us know if you were not able to get through. In fact, I will put my email address on here so that you can let us know that you tried to sign up, but we're not able to, and we'll make sure that you get that discount. So no worries. Sometimes we run into that. some people are getting through, so I'm not sure why some would get through and some others not. But sometimes the browser makes a difference in some situations. Technology is great when it works, but it's not when it doesn't. All right, let's see if there's anybody else there, Ford. I think we're getting close to the end here.
Yeah, we have one there that says when a family member has reached such an impasse of anger and resentment toward each other that there's a complete breakdown, how can the conflicts even begin to be talked about? What happens sometimes is when anger and resentment aren't dealt with early on, it turns into rage. And rage, you see rage across our country right now. It's being modeled. In other words, and when rage comes in, and we see it in the political world a lot, so apply this to the family. When rage comes in, people won't even come to the table because there's so much resentment. And so if you can find something that you can apologize for, even if it's 1% you, 99% them, if you can find a way to try the 6-step apology, that might be a first step. A lot of people deal with this in their family. That's a first step. And also, Oz, we tell people in this training, if you have people in your life that are sick, I mean, they're mentally, they have something going on mentally that needs doctor or medication or real help. Some of the stuff, the counsel I'm giving you may not work because they need real, it could be medical help. But I would try that first and see what happens. But to really explain how much you want the family, but if you can find a way to apologize first, that's typically a good starting point.
That's good. Well, Ford, this has been great. We appreciate everybody being on tonight, and I can tell you from personal experience, this is well worth the investment of time and money, and it literally is going to change your life, and you're going to be amazed at how your relationships are going to be so improved by just applying some of these principles. And so, Ford, thanks for being with us. And any final words there, Ford?
No, Oz, thank you for doing this, for all you do for so many, for all the people that are still on. Thank you for your willingness to stay with us, your willingness to think about, do I want to really be that transformational leader to have the influence? Leadership really is about influence. And there's 5 areas of influence, and I'll just launch us with this. And one is that we influence up. That could be our boss, our parents, our football coach or sports coach, our classroom teacher. Another area of influence is across, and that would be to our peers. And a third level of influence you might call down, the people that you truly do have responsibility or authority with. That could be employees, children, sports team, classroom, a church congregation. And a fourth level is influence with ourselves. And when we think about leadership as influence, we start asking ourselves, what do I have to do in me to have more influence over me to gain more influence with others? And then that fifth level of influence is influence with God. And I believe that transformational leaders, when they go down this path, can have influence in all 5 of those levels. And when they do, that means they've learned to love in ways that maybe they never thought possible. That leads to that kind of influence. And that leads to transformation, impact on other individuals, organizations, and I believe possibly even cities and nations. So thank you for being on with us tonight.
All right, Ford. Well, thanks so much. Let me just close this in a word of prayer. Father, thank you for this wisdom that you've imparted to Ford and now is able to impart to us. And we do pray for every relationship out there that, Lord, you will make them godly relationships that will thrive and just be so much better as a result of applying these truths in their relationships. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, everybody, great to be with you. We'll see you next time, and hope you'll enjoy this course. God bless.